we're good to go. Thanks everyone for taking the time to meet and convene this evening. I don't think I've had the opportunity to meet all of you, but my name is Brian Clinton. I'm a Deputy Chief of Staff for Mayor Kenny, and then new chair of the Board of Labor Standards. This is obviously my first meeting chairing this board, so please bear with me as I get the processes down. But I am definitely excited for the opportunity and looking forward to getting started on the work. We have a few agenda items here, mostly like in-house administrative stuff, I guess you would say, I want to bring before all of you. If anyone has anything else that they want to add or would like to discuss, just jump in whenever you feel a need. Also, I'm sure you guys know Michael from the law department, that he's joining us. Hopefully he can guide us through this smoothly, keep me on the rails. And Michael, obviously, if you need to jump in at any point, please do not hesitate. Looks like the first thing I have here, if any of the board members like to try to identify a vice chair to act as chair in my absence. Michael has notified me we can't officially vote on this matter at this meeting, but it would probably be helpful to identify someone so that that's just teed up for the next meeting. So if anyone's interested in that or volunteering themselves, feel free. Second item, would be the delegation of administrative authority and approval of written decisions to the chair. Hopefully Michael can walk us through this a little bit. But my understanding is that the administrative authorities would be issuing scheduling orders, grant continuances, and approving post-decision findings of fact. Does anyone have any concerns with that or points you'd like to discuss on that?
None.
I don't have any.
And just so you all folks know, I mean, we've kind of been operating where when Monica was chair, kind of scheduling things that would come up, she would handle on her own without reaching out to folks. And so we just wanted to make sure, I think that, we can talk about a formal vote at another meeting or, official written regulations. But if folks have procedural concerns, I think that was the point there.
So do we have a quorum for this meeting? Is this the full board?
Are there any restrictions who can't be the vice chair? Did you hear me?
Hello?
Are there any restrictions as to who can be the vice chair?
Oh, I think Brian was frozen. That's why I
Yeah,
said hello. Okay.
Frozen, sorry, I cut out. Could you repeat that, Valerie, I believe?
Yeah.
No, I just asked, is this the full board in attendance to this meeting today?
I believe so. The maximum is 7. So we have enough to have a functioning board, but it requires everybody to be here.
Okay.
And so I guess just to the vice chair point, if in theory, right, a vice chair could act if Brian's not here, but given the current membership right now, that's kind of more hypothetical than realistic or real. But down the line, if there are more board members and we have a meeting where Brian can't make it, then the vice chair could still run things.
And then I think Pat's question were there any restrictions or requirements for who could be the vice chair?
I think any board member, once could be it as long as the other board members, vote to approve.
Okay.
And Michael, I believe for the board members to officially vote on things like that, that would have to be advertised in an agenda beforehand. Is that correct?
Yeah, so I don't know if you folks serve on other boards or not, but there was an amendment to the Sunshine Act. I believe maybe it was the Philadelphia Code, but either way, sometime last year, that requires that before boards consider substantive items and take votes on matters at meetings, those agenda items need to be advertised online at least 24 hours in advance. So before the next meeting, and we can talk about, I think, probably an administrative process, but anything that board folks want to discuss, we should make sure to kind of collect ahead of time and post online. I will say there's an exception if the board votes because of, for some reason, something couldn't be listed on an agenda, the board can vote to add that item to the agenda and we can post an amended one later. But obviously that kind of gets around the purpose just to let people know what's actually going to be discussed in advance.
So is that any item, any agenda must be advertised in advance, or only agendas where there'll be voting matters?
I would say I would say substantive matters. So if, obviously this board engages in kind of quasi judicial deliberations, which can take place in an executive session. But let's say the board was going to discuss adopting regulations but not vote. Since those deliberations would still be public, the fact that there'll be deliberations about those regulations should also be advertised in the agenda.
Okay, understood.
And I should say too, if individual board members want to add something to the agenda, I mean, obviously that's, I think, their prerogative. But at the same time, if folks want to have a question about whether something would need to be on an agenda, you can feel free to direct that to me and then we can talk about it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So the third agenda item is related to a few administrative procedures, which is really just the cadence of when we want to meet. I propose that these meetings be held quarterly on the third Wednesday of each month. So that would start in July. So the next meeting would be Wednesday, July 20th at 5 p.m. The following one, Wednesday, October 19th at 5 p.m. So if anyone has any objections to that, the third Wednesday of each month at 5 p.m., feel free to just let me know. Not really married to that idea of the third Wednesday. So if anyone has, a better suggestion, feel free.
You
to let me
said
know.
quarterly, not monthly, right?
Yes, quarterly.
Okay.
So that would July, then October, then January for the next
Okay.
few. So if anyone has a conflict, just let me know and we can work something else out on that. The other aspects, I was hoping Michael would probably be able to weigh in on these, but it would be related to how folks prefer to get their information on these cases, whether they would prefer getting a complete package or whether they would rather receive it as files. Michael, you could probably describe these things better than I can, so I can let you kind of take the lead on that, if you would.
Sure. So I think the big question I would imagine is kind of with respect specifically as they come in, what would be most helpful for the board members in terms of considering the materials before, if there is a hearing before the hearing or before, an executive session to discuss the case. So the way it's been working right now generally is when we get an appeal, the chair issues a scheduling order that usually gives each party about a month to send in a brief and request a hearing, and then a couple extra weeks for the other party to reply. We usually do kind of like a, appellant, appellee, and then response. But if board members feel like a different structure would be more helpful, they'd rather have people kind of send in submissions at the same time or something. That would be something that would need to be reflected in a scheduling order. So it would be good for the board members to discuss their preferences for that, I think. And then I think what Brian was saying about like as filed or as a package, I mean, I think generally Jill or Jill and Erica have sent around the materials when an appeal is fully briefed before a meeting. I think they could probably keep doing that, and they could either wait until, a certain amount of time before a meeting and send everything at once. Or if folks would prefer, they could either, send an appeal package, like all the materials, once it's fully briefed, or they could send everything in as its own individual email, when things come in, if board folks would rather, review materials that way. So it's just kind of what would help folks on the board, be most productive in reviewing stuff, and what kind of format, if they have any preference, they'd like to see people submit things in. Because I think the board has a lot of flexibility in terms of defining how the parties before it practice.
So I've been on this board for, feels like forever. Pat and I have been on the board for a long time together. I know that the process of reviewing a complete package, allows you to see the full picture start to finish. And it certainly is more organized than getting piecemeal emails at different stages. Although it is helpful when the appeal itself is filed to get that document initially, and then all subsequent briefs and responses as a full package. And that's just for me, because if I have an understanding of what the appeal is, I can review that appeal, and then with the expectation of then reviewing the subsequent response and submissions related to the appeal.
So I guess my question then is, I'm the newbie here. What is the frequency to which these matters are listed? So I think what I'm thinking more so as far as, I think what Ballard just outlined is probably the most reasonable way to make sure that we know what's in the pipeline, and we know we have the full picture. It's easier to kind of adjudicate those matters when we have the hearings. But I don't think we should be sending materials that are not going to be heard before the next listing. So that's what I'm just trying to understand. Like, if we can send it with the sequential order of when it's going to be listed and we know what's coming up, versus me looking at something that's not going to be listed for another 2 hearings after that, that would be my preference. If I'm, so at least I know what my mind is like, okay, this is coming up. I know that I should have a packet in preparation when it's time to have the hearing and stuff like that. That would be my only comment on that.
Agreed. I don't disagree with you, Dominique.
So just for reference, I think the board has, I mean, COVID obviously has, interrupted things a little bit. There are 7 pending appeals before the board, but only one of them is currently fully briefed. The rest should be fully briefed by probably, if probably by the next meeting. If not that meeting, then the rest by September, although obviously new ones can come in. So I would imagine there would probably be, if this pace kept up, 2 to 3 per meeting would be my guess if the pace continues. And I don't know if it sounds like, Dominique, if like there's a specific amount of, time before the meeting you'd want to have like the cutoff be. So if an appeal doesn't get finished briefing until, a week before, maybe it makes sense to hold it for the next one automatically. But I don't know where folks want to draw that line.
So I apologize. I jumped off one computer to another because everything was becoming broken up to me and I wasn't hearing things too good. So I did possibly miss a little bit, but the discussion around cases that are coming up, and I did hear that there was some conversation about the time before the time. Definitely, I would believe we should have something to look at, especially since we're doing it virtually, before we have to get on and deal with it. Because some of these cases, if we're talking about more than one at each meeting, some of them could last a few meetings. And we've seen that happen.
So since the board's not voting anything, I don't think there needs to be like a final decision today.
Right.
But maybe something. So I think from the kind of administrative side of the board, we can talk to Jill and Erica to try to get materials circulated to you guys a certain amount in advance. And then if we hear back from the board that this wasn't enough time, we'll know that is, or obviously at a future meeting, if the board says, this is what we want the cutoff to be, then the board can vote on that. And, I think the staff will follow that.
If I could flip back to the question about a vice chair, are there restrictions of folks on the board who can or cannot be in that position? No? Okay.
So I just wanted to loop back. So you said there's currently 7 appeals that are currently filed, and one of them is fully briefed with the respondent brief and everything like that. So at our next, when are we going to have that matter listed? I guess I'm trying to understand, how do we go through the cycle of listing these matters? When would that actual hearing be held for that one?
So the board could just wait till the next scheduled meeting,
Okay.
if the quarterly system ends up being adopted, or the board could, Brian could call, right? Really, anybody could call if somebody seconds, but a special meeting to consider it if folks want to hear it sooner. I imagine, Jill will send around the materials shortly anyway, regardless of when the meeting is going to be scheduled. But
I would think that if it's a case where timing has an effect on the person or persons, that could be negative, that maybe the timing that we move on it would be helpful for them. I mean, I've unfortunately have had cases, as we know, have gone 7 years before we could get it adjudicated. And that, so we don't want that kind of a thing to happen. So if it's something that really has an effect on a person's being, whether it be financial or otherwise, I think those should be moved without waiting for another meeting. We should have a special meeting for them, I think. And listen, anybody knows me knows I'm not looking to fill a calendar. That's not one of my problems, but I don't want to see people hanging either that have been not treated fairly.
So I think maybe one thing, and I could talk to the staff folks about it, is having some way for parties to let us know if they want expedited consideration, and we can share that information with the board. Or, if the board decides later on they want to let Brian make that call unilaterally, that's fine too. But we can have a way of flagging those cases.
Okay.
Okay. Does anyone have anything else they would like to discuss at this meeting? Sounds good. I can also forward my information to everyone on this call, just so they have it. And then looks like I can talk to Jill about getting the next meeting on the calendar, which it looks like would be Wednesday, July 20th. But other than that, looks like I could let everyone go for tonight.
This is kind of a question maybe there's no answer to right now. Is there a general, is the cases that are pending, 7 cases, are they generally around one specific law that we have, or are they variable?
They vary. I would say some are wage theft, some are related to Fair Work Week, some are sick leave, and I think there's at least one that's related to the laws the city adopted specifically regarding COVID-19.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Okay. Are we good?
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll see you guys
Thanks, everyone.
Wednesday, July 20th.
Sounds great.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Appreciate it. Sorry about my computer.
No worries. Bye-bye.
Have a good night, everybody.